Broadcasting from Youngstown, Ohio, this is the MV Red Podcast, the show where we talk about news and politics impacting the Mahoning Valley, the state of Ohio, and the USA. If you want to subscribe to our podcast, find us on your favorite podcast streaming app or visit our website, www.mvred.com. If you want to share your opinion with us, please email info@mvred.com, as we would love to hear from you. Now, let's get things started. Here are your hosts, Michael Metzinger and Dane Davis.
There we go. All right. Welcome to episode 34 of the MV Red Podcast. We're going to get right into this. We are thrilled this evening to be joined by U.S. Senate candidate Bernie Moreno, who, as we're going to talk about in a minute, a poll just came out today, I believe, from your campaign showing you in third place and moving up in the Senate poll ranking. So but before we get into that, I'd love for you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I believe you were born in Colombia and came to the U.S. So kind of tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us some background.
Sure. Now, just to clarify, Colombia, South America.
That's right.
Not South Carolina.
Yeah.
So I was born down in Colombia. 50 years ago, my mom and dad moved to the United States, moved here legally with my 5 brothers, my sister, and myself to South Florida. I call it the sorting station for all South Americans. Although my family stayed there. Most of my relatives and my mom stayed in Fort Lauderdale. I decided I love cars. I want to be in the car business. I wrote a letter to the chairman of the board of General Motors when I was 14, telling him I wanted to take over his job. He actually wrote back, and I ended up fulfilling that. I went to school at the University of Michigan because I wanted to be near the car business. I went to work for Automobile Magazine as a kid, freshman year, during school, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year. And then during the summers, I worked for Saturn Corporation as an intern, and then met my wife, who's my chauffeur today, and so I could do this podcast, and went to work for Saturn full time when I graduated. They moved me from Michigan to Tennessee to Spring Hill to Pennsylvania. And then I met a car dealer from Boston who wanted me to run one of his dealerships when I was 26, but I had never worked in a car dealership in my life. Took that job, made that dealership his most profitable store. And then in 2005, Mercedes-Benz called me and said that they had the worst, most underperforming dealership in the country, wanted me to buy it. It was selling 4 cars a month. I turned into one of the largest car dealership groups in the country. I built 14 other dealerships with total 30 brands. We did about $1 billion in annualized revenue.
Wow.
And sold that business 3 years ago to focus on building a technology company that uses blockchain to digitize car titles. Built that company in Cleveland, even though everybody told me, don't do it in Cleveland, it's going to be too hard there. But did it in Cleveland. We have about 70 people working in downtown Cleveland, all Americans, all coding. And the company's on its way to be one of the first tech unicorns in Cleveland. So very excited about that. That's what brings you up until the day I announced for political office.
I wish Michael scheduled you earlier because I just bought a car, I think 2 days ago, Bernie, and you could have given me, like, if I gave you softball questions, right? You could have given me like a massive discount on the car. Although probably it wasn't a Mercedes. I'm not in the market for a Mercedes. It was a Grand Cherokee, a Jeep.
Nice car. Well, remember, I sold the dealerships 3 years ago. So
oh, that's
I don't
true.
Know any more dealerships, right?
Oh, that's fair. Okay.
And there's no such thing as a discount right now. Cars are in very high demand.
Yeah.
So you're probably just lucky to get one.
Yes. Yeah.
Real quick, you mentioned, and it obviously doesn't bother me because, as I'll say, I'm a Notre Dame fan. Do you get any flack for being a Michigan grad, running for U.S. Senate in Ohio?
No, not really. Who knows? I mean, we haven't gotten into the attack mode of the general election yet. But the reality is I went to Michigan because I was a kid growing up in South Florida, wanted to be in the car business. And that's
the best place to go.
Yeah. And if you want to be near Detroit, it's where you go.
Bernie, so I got to say, right, I've been involved with like Geauga County politics. My wife and I moved back to the area. Now it's going on 4 years ago. And I'm plugged in with like the young Republicans locally. And when you talk to everybody, right, you've got a very competitive Senate race. Lots of names coming up there, a lot of really polarizing names. But there's one guy that everybody I talk to, they're like, he seems like a really nice guy. And if he's not their number one choice, he's like their number two choice. And that's you, Bernie Moreno. And you kind of come out of nowhere and really have risen the ranks. So what is going on? Who is Bernie Moreno? Like that, we got your resume, but like, why are you running for Senate? And how have you been doing so well? Like, and seriously, I'm not just saying this to blow smoke up your ass, but like everybody I talk to, they're like, yeah, I've got my favorite. It might be whoever, right? But Bernie seems like a really nice guy. I'd like him too. How'd you do that? How'd you pull it off? Are you giving everybody Mercedes? Like, what's the scene?
Well, again, I sold the deal. I think it's what you see is what you get. I'm doing this because this country is in a really bad direction. I've seen this direction before. Cuba, it's what happened in Venezuela. It's what's happening in Peru and Chile. It's socialism, and we cannot allow that to come in the United States. I feel a moral obligation to leave this country better for my kids and my grandkids and your grandkids than when I found it. And what I really want to do is not run because I want to make myself famous or build wealth or even have a job. That's not why I'm going to go to Washington, D.C. I'm going to go to Washington, D.C. to actually bring this service back into public service. This idea that somebody accomplishes something in your life, you go serve your country, and then you go home. We have that formula completely wrong. Our founders gave it to us. They told us this is the recipe. Instead, we've created career politicians. We've created a celebrity class in politics. We've created a political class. All that, people are just sick and tired of it. And the reality is the stakes are too high. We've seen what the I call it illiberal radical left can do to this country when they have power. We have to stop them. We have to get our country back. And people are just sick of the same old, same old.
The Latin America comparison, and it's really apt, right? Like you look at Latin America, Venezuela is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Well, it has some of the highest natural resources. Argentina, around the turn of the last century, was an extremely wealthy country, and then it just got run into the ground. And it's like the same story, right? Like every time one of the countries would start to modernize and get things together, some far leftists would come in and just set the country back 30, 40 years. And there's no reason a country like Venezuela, with all the oil that they have, should be in poverty, right? Where people are literally starving. Chile, I visited Chile in my old job. It's a beautiful country, great people. Again, lots of natural resources, tons of copper, and they're going super left wing, the socialists. So, it's interesting that Latin America is really relevant to where the United States is going.
Yeah, it's we see the playbook. The playbook is played over and over again. I call AOC the Evita of America.
Yeah.
It's always just based on a lie, right? The lie is, listen, I'll solve all your problems. I'll give you everything you want. The only thing I want in exchange is your freedom and your liberties. And so people make that deal with the devil. They give up their freedom and liberty, and guess what they get? Right? Nothing. They get misery. They get horror. They get just the worst part of humanity unleashed upon them. We've seen it play out over really since the moment this country was created, because it wasn't until the Declaration of Independence where Thomas Jefferson wrote, that our rights come from God, not from government. And the government's job isn't to give us rights, it's to secure our rights. And it was since that moment in time till today that there's this battle between authoritarianism, fascism, socialism, whatever you want to call it, versus freedom and liberty. And for me, when we started locking down America and telling people that their jobs are essential and not essential, and closing schools, to me, I'm like, wow, this looks eerily familiar. It's really what motivated me to start really seriously thinking about this. Then I saw the election of Biden. I saw what he started to do. And it became clear that our problem is very simple. We keep sending the same kinds of people to Washington, D.C., and we expect different results. The reality is I wouldn't have hired any of these people to run any of my companies, yet we hire them to run our country. And that's the problem we have. These are just political stunt artists. They don't have any core beliefs. They don't even take the time to even understand the topics. And yet we send them to DC expecting something different to happen.
So let me ask you this. So this poll, I believe your campaign put out today, shows a pretty tight race. And the theme that we've seen across a lot of these polls, whether there's only been a handful of public polls, most of the ones we've seen have been internals, have been Mandel kind of at that top. However, former state treasurer. He's run before for the U.S. Senate against Sherrod Brown, lost, but he's not running away with it. Around that 20. This poll shows around 20%. So he's clearly not running away with it. And in this poll, you're up to 10% from sixth to third place. Nobody's running away with it. I guess, two questions. Do you envision this race coming down to a potential endorsement from President Trump? And B, if some people start backing out? Because right now, I think it's a wide open race that anybody, they get the momentum at the right point in time, could win this. And it's interesting to have a race for U.S. Senate with this many candidates for the voters to decide on.
Well, there's going to be lots of bends in the river. What I will tell you, it's all about momentum. The reality is that Josh should be the perennial winner in this race. Just the idea that he ran 5 times statewide. People know who he is. There's nobody really doesn't know who Josh is. So when somebody has virtually 100% name ID throughout the state, and yet 8 out of 10 people are saying, give me somebody else, it's a pretty big indictment on that. He started in his own polls in the high 30s. In my poll, he's down to 19, which is the poll Kellyanne Conway just did. He started at 15, went to 19, now is down to 18. She calls that momentum. I don't think she's ever raced the cars before, because I don't think you call that momentum. Maybe she's only seen kind of cars with engines that get shut off. But and then you look at me, which is nobody knew who the heck is this guy, right? Maybe they did know me, was out of context. He was a guy that owned some car dealerships, but now I'm in third place. That's incredible considering we've only done 6 weeks of advertising. Mike Gibbons forgets to tell people he ran at 18. Everybody kind of forgets about that. He ran at 18. He won 33% of the vote. He's only polling at 9% now. So what does that tell you? And he spent an insane amount of money for many, many, many months, and yet is behind me. JD Vance is having a love affair with Tucker Carlson. So you wonder, should that help, right? I mean, I think those two guys are BFFs somewhere. I don't know. Maybe that's where JD will live. Maybe JD and Tucker will be roommates if he ever got to DC. But he's at 8%, which is terrible, and he's got $10 million behind him. And I think if the race were in DC, JD would win, but not in Ohio. So you look at that dynamic and you say, well, who's really making the moves? It's only me making the moves. I'm the one going from 0 to between 10 and 11% in really 6 weeks. And here's the most interesting part of the poll. And I'm not a political pundit, but this is what was interesting to me. When we asked people, okay, have you met Bernie or have you seen one of his ads? I am the clear front runner by a lot. Like, I do run away with the race when that question's asked. The problem comes when people answer, no, I've not met him and I haven't seen his ads. I'm back to 1%. So I'm between 10 and 11 because not everybody knows who I am. So I think when people get to know me, get to know my message, see that I'm a fresh, something new and interesting, that's not going to be the same old rehashed politician or perennial candidate or insider or celebrity or just flamethrower, I think I'm going to win.
Yeah. Well, we see your ads up in Youngstown quite a bit.
I had a question. When you're on the campaign trail, what are voters most concerned about? Like, how would you frame this election? Like, what are people? I mean, I can imagine the issues, but I'm curious to hear it from your lips. What are people genuinely concerned about? And they're like, Bernie, I'm worried about X, Y, Z. What are those issues? And then maybe the second part to that is like, given that, what are you looking to do to address those?
I think overall, overarching everywhere in Ohio, they're just incredibly pissed off and incensed that they feel they're losing their country. They feel that every single politician, with the exception of President Trump, has let them down. They've promised one thing and delivered something completely different, except for President Trump. They see the way he was treated in D.C. by the media, by fellow Republicans, and by the hard left, and feel it's incredibly unfair because Trump said it well. They aren't just after him, they're after his voters. And they're sick and tired of being called racist. It's so exhausting. Just because you have a conservative ideal does not make you a racist. Because you want a secure border does not make you a racist. Because you want inflation not to kill your wages does not make you a racist. Because you want a trade deal that benefits America does not make you a racist. They're sick and tired of it. They feel like they don't have power and control over their own country, and they want it back. And they are paying a lot of attention, which I love, which goes back to your previous question of why I'm doing well, is because people see that. They see this is somebody who gets what they're talking about, and they're so tired of celebrity politicians people who are just pandering nonsense. They just say a bunch of gobbledygook and make political stunts just to say it. They're just so tired of that stuff. That's what I see everywhere. And they also, especially in places like Youngstown, they want their manufacturing back. We want to make stuff back here in America. We don't want to be dependent on China. The average American is fundamentally so much smarter than these Harvard elites who are running the country right now. It's not even close.
So you mentioned, and you just mentioned about manufacturing in Youngstown. So, and kind of doing some research for this, I remember a few years back when GM Lordstown was talking about selling the plant of a plan, which you may or may not be able to confirm, that maybe involved an idea of yours, a plan that could possibly keep the plant viable, keep the people employed. Obviously, GM went a different route. So, as a guy who understands the auto industry, now we have Lordstown Motors, we have Foxconn that's going to pretty much, sounds like, own most of the complex. What do you see? Do you see a path forward for that? Because I think the people in the Mahoning Valley, we lost GM Lordstown, big employer, right from where Dane grew up. And so we want to know, I mean, is this Lordstown Motors thing going to work out? Is Foxconn going to work out? Auto and the auto industry. What are your thoughts?
Listen, I'm an optimistic guy. I want it to work. How can you not cheer for it to succeed? But the reality is, I thought it back then. I'll say it again now. It's a disaster. It's basically a Ponzi scheme, shell game. When I proposed to General Motors to do a car sharing service called Cruise that I would own with a very, very substantial partner, we were going to be customers of General Motors. So we guaranteed General Motors that we'd buy 5 years worth of production, 2 shifts. We'd build the technology, which we had all done. It was ready to go. We had partnered.
I don't know if he's cutting out a little bit, Michael. Sorry, I think you were cutting out just a sec. Yeah, keep going.
Tech company to build the underlying technology. We're going to have this amazing ride-sharing service, standardized, people with uniforms, dress well, standards. We own the car, lease them out to the drivers. Plant open, we shifts, 4,500 workers. It was a done deal. And at left field, a group came in with the Lordstown Motors proposal. I saw it. I said to GM, this is total crap. This car, it does say it's going to do. This is all smoke mirrors. But GM wanted to close the factory, so they took that deal. And actually, ironically, I was asked to invest in that company. I said, my God, absolutely not. And here we are. The stock's trading at 95% of its peak, and it's basically a nothing. And it didn't have to happen that way. And, there's an opponent of mine in this race that was the one responsible for making that happen. And eventually that will come out. He made tens of millions of dollars in that deal. And it's not good. It's not good for the Valley. It's very sad. It pisses me off because if that factory had stayed open with 2 shifts, it would have really made a big difference in that community. So what we got to do is we got to pivot there. I think we got to look at nuclear power plants with semiconductor chips located near them. I think this push towards electrification is idiotic. Most of the lithium in the world is mined by China. Most of the finished batteries come from China. We should not be pushing into this electrification the way that we're doing. It's totally stupid.
I like the talk on nuclear energy. I think nuclear it's the solution to a lot of our problems, and it's sad that we've kind of fallen behind. For the country that embedded this technology for the world when we were a leader in it, right now we're kind of like in 3rd or 4th place behind China and the French and maybe the Germans. So
the French are killing it. The French are killing it with nuclear. And it's funny because the Germans got all woke and decided to build windmills.
Right.
And now we're importing coal and natural gas from Russia. And the French are sitting there laughing at them. So sometimes, when the French outsmart you, we're in trouble. So we need to get back to modern nuclear power. We can do that really well in Ohio. Take advantage of our natural gas, our land, our water. We can be powerhouses in manufacturing, especially around semiconductor chips. Nuclear power, steel, pharmaceuticals, PP. We can do that all in Ohio.
So one of the things you said that I appreciate, right, is that people kind of gravitated towards Trump. And the left just doesn't understand this because of what he was talking about. Yeah, there was the personality in that, but he was bringing up issues that no Republican had touched with a 10-foot pole. And I'll give you an example, right? Like Trump asked the question, why did we fight Iraq, Afghanistan? How is that helping us? Like, how were Americans benefiting from that? Why were we seeing our manufacturing base outsourced? And what did we get in return? Like, I'm an economist. I'm a banker, actually. So when you talked about Gibbons, a competitor to him, but it's ironic. Like they said, like you'll lose your manufacturing jobs, but hey, don't worry, you'll get cheaper prices, right? Just-in-time manufacturing. And the reality is, we've lost the jobs, we've lost the industrial base, we've lost our competitiveness, and we've gone very little in return. So these are the issues that why people gravitate towards Trump that the left just can't get. So I got to ask, and this is the awkward question. And, there are some past tweets you sent out that were kind of anti-Trump. So here's the cynical point of view, and hopefully this is wrong. Did you just switch to becoming pro-Trump because Ohio is an extremely pro-Trump state? And like in 15 and 16, you were anti-Trump because, a lot of the Republican establishment was anti-Trump. And then he wins, and now you're like switching on to him. Talk about your evolution there. Is the cynical view right, or is there something more to it?
No, it's pretty straightforward. In 2015, I knew I wasn't going to support Kasich for president. I had met him. I didn't like him as a person. I thought his personality was very crass.
Yeah.
Josh Mandel introduced me to Marco Rubio. So Josh set up the meeting. I got along with Marco. Thought him and I had a lot in common. He's from Cuba. I'm from Colombia. We're about the same age. He lives in South Florida. That's where I grew up. So I was Marco's guy in Ohio. For him. President Trump, I didn't know. He was a developer. I thought he was rolling younger on with the Clintons and Schumer. I didn't think he was a real conservative. Obviously, in hindsight, I was completely wrong. He's one of the most important presidents we've ever had, one of the most conservative presidents we've ever had. Did more things for America than I could have ever imagined. And when he became our nominee, I supported him. I was at the convention, support the convention, obviously supported him once became president, but that was 7 years ago. This idea that I sent the tweet saying, Trump was a maniac in 2015. Yeah, a lot of people thought that, by the way. 95% of Republicans didn't support Trump back then. The question is, did you support
myself
Trump once
included
he became president? Well, yeah. The question is, did you support his agenda and him when he became president? The answer, of course, that answer is yes. I'm the only candidate in this race who's even raised money for him in the last 12 months. I raised six figures for him. And now that I've been through this process for 9.5 months, I don't understand how he didn't tweet angrier tweets or be even more caustic, because the media is so insanely unfair, so insanely biased, that I don't know how he put up with it, honestly. But, the reality is he spoke the truth. He spoke plainly. His policies were clearly correct. We had the best economy we've ever had. If it wasn't for COVID, if it wasn't for the cheating that happened in the election, if it wasn't for the media, we'd have President Trump right now. We wouldn't have 13 dead Americans. Afghanistan wouldn't be a mess. We wouldn't have a crisis at the border. We wouldn't have inflation. We wouldn't be begging OPEC for oil. Russia would be not even thinking about invading Ukraine. China wouldn't be thinking about blockading Taiwan. The world would be safer. So to all these Republicans that, are like, oh, I don't know, I didn't like the rhetoric. You know what? How do you like it now? And so for me, it's pretty straightforward on that one. And that's why I have the support of Kellyanne Conway, Rick Grinnell, 5 other Trump ambassadors, Daryl Scott, Jerron Smith. All these people are Trump people who support me. They know what the gig is. Look at what Ted Cruz said about Trump in 15. Look at what Marco Rubio said about Trump in 15. Look at what his chief of staff said about Trump in 15. It's silly.
Kellyanne Conway seems to me, if she's ever in Sugar and Falls, you let me know, because she seems like a really intelligent, and not only does she seem very intelligent, but she seems like a genuinely nice, kind human being. I have the utmost respect for her. Put politics aside, I think she's really, really capable, really smart, and I think she's got a good finger on the electorate. So having her on your side, first of all, is she as good as I imagine her to be? And how did you get her on your side? What's it like working with her? Just as a little sidebar.
Well, first of all, she's brilliant. She's a very, very warm and kind person. Other than President Trump, nobody took more abuse from the media than she did. She continues to. The media treated her so unfairly. If she was a Democrat, she would be on the cover of every magazine on earth. As the first woman to run a successful presidential campaign. But she's brilliant. The way I got her is I got introduced to her through my daughter. My daughter had a big job in the Trump campaign. And Kellyanne interviewed me. And it was a 2-hour interview. Believe me, it wasn't easy. She's tough. She asked very direct questions. And she wouldn't sign up for my campaign if she was somebody who thought I was anti-Trump or anti-Trump agenda. That's not even that's a showstopper for her. She knows what I'm all about. It's an honor to have her on my team. Rick Grenell, the same way. Rick Grenell has been probably one of the most loyal people in the administration. He's a phenomenal mind, great communicator. So we've got some amazing people on the team.
Yeah, it's impressive. It's impressive that you're able to get both of them. And Rick is also a very intelligent guy, very, very sharp. But what makes Kellyanne, I think, so different is that you could tell she's just a genuine person. And I just feel so bad about her husband on Twitter. But I'm not even going to go there. I just think that's so crude on his part. Michael, I know you got another question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so kind of pivot a little bit. I know this question came up in one of the Senate town halls. So would you seek an endorsement from retiring Senator Rob Portman?
Yeah, of course. Why not? Why would you?
I agree.
That's a bizarre argument. No, don't endorse me. Vote for my opponent.
I agree. There's one other who is quite critical that may or may not have been on our podcast last episode.
Mark says stuff like that, and I just laugh at Mark because it's just silly, right? He actually said, "I'd rather lose against it." Come on, stop it. Now you're just being silly. Republicans invented the circular firing squad nonsense that happens. At the end of the day, it's one party, it's one fight. We can have arguments internally. We believe in the marketplace of ideas. Rob Portman's a very, very good man. Do I agree with some of the things that he's done, especially around the infrastructure law? Absolutely not. Does it mean that he's a bad person? Absolutely not. Is he a gentleman? Is he a statesman? Yes. Again, is he maybe in the wrong era in terms of what needs to happen in D.C. in terms of the fight? Yes, which is why he's retiring and why you need term limits, because there's a time. All of us have expiration dates, right? So we shouldn't be down in D.C. for more than 2 terms as your senator. That's what Rob's doing, and I absolutely applaud him for knowing when his time is to go, and I think that's great. Plus, he's got a big family, so if he endorses me, his relatives are going to vote for me. I need all the votes I can get.
Is he Catholic? Is Rob Portman a Catholic?
I believe so. Yes.
Both Michael and I are Catholics. I'm going to presume you are because of the Latin American angle.
I'm from Colombia, so 99.9. Plus, 7 kids in my family, 13 in my dad's family, 23 in my grandfather's family. So
my gosh!
That by definition makes you Catholic.
Yeah, that's great. I married into a Catholic family, so and we're expecting our 3rd child in a couple weeks here. So
congrats!
Yeah, thank you. What was I going to ask? I had a good question. So you talked to a lot of Republicans, and here's the problem they have, right? Republican voters, when people are on the campaign trail, they're like dream candidates. Like, I'm listening to you now and you're saying everything right, and I'm like, man, this guy sounds right. He gets it. He's hitting all the issues. This is perfect, right? And Republicans elect these people to office, and then they stab their own voters in the back from time to time. And I don't mean that you have to, as an elected representative, agree with the Republican base 100% of the time, right? There are going to be issues where you diverge. I understand that. But it seems like Republicans will fight the battle. They'll elect somebody to office, and then they just stab them in the back. Kasich is a really good example. I think it was so vulgar and rude. And I was somebody as a young guy, and when he was in the House of Representatives, I thought he did great work on the budget. We elected him as the Ohio governor, and then he wouldn't even attend the convention, right, in his own state.
Yeah, it's gross.
That was just wrong, right? Even if you don't like the guy, you still attend and welcome people.
At least, I mean, the Democrat mayor of Cleveland attended it. Exactly.
Hey, welcome people to Ohio. My God,
welcome people to Ohio, right? So here's my question to you: how do we know as voters that like Bernie is the right guy, right? Like, how do we know you're not going to like flip flop once you're in the Senate and you've got that incumbency advantage and stab us in the back, right? Like, what can you say on that topic?
I would say that, first of all, I call it betrayal, and that's the biggest issue
Yes.
that I mentioned earlier. It's this idea that the Republicans have betrayed the primaries, which is why I tell people, look at how they campaign. Are you willing to answer any question? Do you show up to meetings early, stay late, and answer every question that room has? Or do you walk in with a bunch of handlers, give a BS stump speech, and then run out of there to get on Fox News or to go to the next event, right? Or so if that's a sign, it tells you they're not willing to hold themselves accountable to the voters as a candidate. You're not going to hold yourself accountable as an office holder. So I'd say that's number one. Number two, why are you doing this? Like, what's the point? Like, you look at some of these guys, you say, what is motivating you, truly motivating you to do this? Are you doing it for a job? Because you want to build wealth? Because you want to make this your career? This is your way you made money? You know, look at a guy like Tim Ryan, right? Me and Tim Ryan are the best examples of the two opposite poles of this. Tim Ryan, this is how he feeds his family, his entire life. This is what he wants to do to build wealth and reputation. For me, I've lived the American dream on my own. I had to live and hunt on my own. I'm doing this to serve the public. I will answer any question from anyone at any time. And whether you agree with me or not, I'm going to tell you what I think. And I think it's on the voter, on the citizen. We have to be dramatically better bosses. You can't just interview me or talk to me when I'm on the campaign trail, when I'm pandering to you and want your vote. You have to hold me accountable when I'm in office and say, no, you work for us. You need to come to these meetings, not to talk at us, but to listen. And we're going to tell you what to do, not the other way around. That's the way government's supposed to work. But again, just watch how they act. Watch, are they managed by handlers? Are they giving just BS canned stump speeches with notes, right? Are they giving just talking points? Are they a real person? That's the only way you know. Listen, I'll be honest with you guys. I spent 35 years getting to the point where right now I can live my American dream. I can be sailing off into the sunset, literally. And I'm choosing to serve my country. Look at the others. Why are they doing it? Right? And I think that answers the question for you as to whether they're going to be susceptible to that kind of stuff or not. You know, can they be bought? You know, I'll give you, for instance. You guys offer me $10 million for my campaign. Do you think I owe you anything for that?
That's a fair point. It's a totally fair point. Yeah.
So I'm going to say, hey, listen, Joe Blow gave me $10 million. This organization gave me $5 million. But no, I'm going to be accountable to you who gave me nothing or $5. Come on. We're not that stupid. You know, because the reason they betray us is because they've been bought by somebody else. Right? So look at who's bought. Who's bought now as a candidate? Who has a history of being bought? That's what they loved about President Trump. No, listen, President Trump would walk in. Can you imagine some lobbyist saying to him, hey, Mr. President, if you do this, we'll get you a steak dinner at the Penthouse. Trump would be, I own that restaurant and mine's better, right?
Right. Very good. Yeah, totally right. Yeah.
So, whereas you get some of these people like a Tim Ryan, and Tim Ryan can be bought, but he is bought and paid for. Let's be honest. These special interest groups, they own him. He doesn't work for the people of Youngstown. He works for the special interest in D.C. That's who's writing his paycheck. That's who feeds him. So that's, I guess, a long way to answer your question. Just look at that.
So, Bernie, both Michael and I grew up in Tim Ryan's district, right? So we both went to Catholic high school in Youngstown, Ohio. And Tim Ryan was somebody who 25 years ago now, he was a fresh face. He was kind of like a conservative, moderate Democrat, pro-Second Amendment, pro-life, you know, like a good Catholic schoolboy. And he was like one of those working class Democrats, right? Which we know a lot of, and I think that they're fundamentally good people with just kind of a different view in the world. And then he has become literally one of the most liberal representatives, and you can tell he is just an empty suit. And
it pays well. It pays well.
Yeah, you could tell, like, whatever the check is coming in. You know, if the teachers union said tomorrow, like, hey, make everybody sit outside and eat their lunch in like negative 10 degrees weather because, you know, we don't want to break some teachers union code and we don't want to get COVID or whatever, you know, like what's going on in some of the big cities, he would totally endorse that, right? Even though it's completely ridiculous. That's a horrible example. I'm sorry. I'm trying to think of a good one. But like the most absurd policy, he would sign on to it because he's completely beholden to all the left-wing interest groups. I will say one of the big draws to Trump for a lot of people was this guy is self-funded. He's got his own money, and he can kind of break the ideological rigidity of the Republican Party because 10 years ago, this was a party that was all in favor of the wars, all in favor of overseas invasion, talked only about free trade and talked about job creators. And like the average American, right, the guy that works at a factory or the middle class accountant or that, were totally left behind by the message. And Trump's rhetoric focused on these people and said like, hey, you know, it doesn't have to be this way. And the party and politics should serve your interests, not like, you know, the most important issue is not the capital gains tax, right? For example. I'm ranting. I'll pause and turn it over to Michael, but I appreciate that. I think that's a fair point that you make about self-funding.
Well, and again, look at where it comes from. But it's not just self-funded because it's not right to just go out and buy a Senate seat. You know, I'm proud of the fact that I raised almost $4 million from individuals. But I wish I were a reporter because I would ask these questions. I'd go to some of my opponents and say, what is the quid pro quo? I mean, somebody gave you $10 million. Like, what do they expect back? Nothing? Come on, stop it. Some group is giving you $5 million. What do they want back? You know, whose call are you going to return first? The guy in Youngstown who needs something from you, or the guy who gave you $10 million? When you're in the Senate and you're traveling the state, who are you going to go visit? The donors or the people? Right? So, and this idea of bought and paid for politicians is really, at the end of the day, the root cause of all of our issues. It's why we got betrayed. Is why, you know, you said it didn't work out for us to send our jobs overseas to China. Well, it worked out really well for the people who made a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, that's you know, I could give you an example. You know, I like Mike Gibbons. I think he's a nice guy. But when he was a banker, he sold a company called Easy Fit to the Chinese. Easy Fit made stuff here in America. It employed Americans, thousands of them. It's this Chinese company that Mike facilitated buying them, closes that company down, bankrupts it, leaves a trail of misery. And now all those products that used to be made in America are now made in China. You know, he likes to go around the state saying that, you know, I'm a used car salesman. Well, I did sell used cars. I sold new cars. I sold service. I sold parts. I sold insurance. What I didn't do is sell out my country. And so you look at people who say, well, that's why voters have got to pay attention. Who are these people and what are they really doing? So those are the things that I think that the hard questions that have to be asked of candidates if we want to avoid this horrible cycle of recycled betrayal.
So there's a lot of undecided voters right now in this race, trying to figure out who they like. And Dane touched on it. Your commercials are an introduction to voters. I think that you come across as a very likable guy, somebody they could definitely see represent them in Washington. But in terms of the 50 Republican U.S. senators in Washington, is there one in particular that maybe you gravitate towards on policy, style, that, you know, some of these undecided voters could say, you could say, I'm like, or I could see myself kind of being like this U.S. senator, just to give people an idea of maybe how you would represent us in Washington?
That's a great question. Yeah.
Not really. No. You know, I'm not a career politician. I'm not an insider. I'm not somebody who's there to do this for a living. I was born in South America, so I'm not a natural born citizen. So I can't be president of the United States, which makes me different than the other 99 senators who have that aspiration. You know, they're not necessarily all there for public service. They're there maybe for ulterior motives. I don't know. Listen, I'll work with anybody who wants to do the right thing for America, who's going to benefit Ohio. But I'm not going to model myself after any of these guys because, again, I'm not a career politician, and unfortunately, that's a lot of what we got down there.
What who that you've read or listened to growing up, like what led you to your beliefs? Like, who was the person? Was it a politician? Was it like a writer? Who led you to believe what you believe today?
Well, I'd say the people politically that most influenced me were my dad. My dad was somebody who spent a lot of time talking about politics. It's what we did. Even I'm not talking about as an adult. I'm talking about 8, 9, 10-year-old. And you had to know what you were talking about. So if you were somebody who had an opinion, my dad may have had a different one, but if you could support your position with logic, he respected you. If you thought that you were somebody who was just talking, as he said, mierda, which you can look up what that means, then he wouldn't respect that. So I'd say my dad first. Reagan, certainly. You know, I learned English listening to Reagan's speeches as a kid. He was very influential in my life politically, but also three dead Americans, James Madison, John Jay, and Alexander Hamilton. The Federalist Papers are one of the things that I studied as a kid. I think every American should be made to learn what happened between 1776 and 1791 and really understand how this country came to be. Because I don't think most Americans, and most certainly young people, don't realize it's a miracle we have a country, that we actually became the United States of America. And I think it goes back to what I want to create is a Federalist movement. We have a Freedom Caucus, we have a Problem Solvers Caucus. I want to have the Federalist Caucus, which is the idea that we go back to our roots, shrink the scale and size of the federal government, return the power to the states where it's closer to the people and there's more accountability. And so I would implore people to really study that. There's another great book called The Anti-Federalist Papers, which is the people that were fighting those three, and really was interesting how they turned them. And so those are the people who most influenced my political beliefs.
So,
James Madison. So I'll anticipate your next question. James Madison is my favorite founding father.
I have a lot of respect for you because that is a very intellectual answer. I think a lot of Americans don't even know what the Federalist Papers are, and it's sad because those are like the instruction manual to the Constitution, so to speak. It explains the reasoning behind all of it, and they're such great documents. They're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. They're just an excellent treatise on like human nature and government and like why they built it the way they did. And James Madison, you're absolutely right, was the guy behind that. So kudos to you, because I don't think that's an easy answer. I think that not a lot of people would get that, but like a lot of respect for you on that answer. Right?
Well, so let me give you.
You get a point for me on that one.
There you go.
Yeah.
How many points are possible? I just was counting.
I don't know yet.
So I'll give you my favorite quote. So tell me whether this sounds like a quote from today or from 1789.
Yeah.
We have to protect the citizens from the enterprising ambitions of government. Think about that for a second. Are we talking about 1789 or are we talking about 2022?
Totally
right? The enterprising ambitions of government. The idea that government tells us that our businesses are essential. You're not an essential worker. You can have 20 people at your house for Thanksgiving. You need to close your business by this hour. I mean, these are things that James Madison wrote 1789. And by the way, you know what the answer is that he has in that Federalist 46? He talks about the way you prevent that is by having an armed citizenry. Yes. And man, Australia has learned that lesson, haven't they?
Yeah. Yes. And by dividing the government and having states in the federal government, the different branches of the federal government, so you set power against power. So yeah, you're absolutely right. An armed citizenry watching over all of it. I would say, so my next question, I'm looking to close this out. And first of all, again, thank you very much for your time. I know it's valuable. Wrapping up on my end, with the Senate campaign, there's going to be a winner. There's going to be 5 or 6 losers. And I think there are a lot of great candidates. If you don't win it, what is your next step? Like, I think that the people of Ohio have taken well to you. I think you've built up a good reputation. You're a young guy. You've got an opportunity ahead of you. What's next if you don't win the Senate? Would you consider maybe another office, or would you want to run for a house or something like that?
No.
Wow.
I figured some of my other answers have been longer, so I'm going to make that short. No, yeah. Listen, I wouldn't do this if I didn't think I was going to win. But in the scenario in which I don't win, I'm going to enjoy my life.
Okay,
that's respectful.
Well, if you ever come out to Chagrin Falls, like I will. First of all, you can review my car and tell me whether it was a good buy or not, because you know cars probably better than anybody else in the state.
Where did you buy it? Did you buy it at Classic?
I bought the Grand Cherokee Limited, and I got it up in Detroit.
Detroit. Gotcha. Which dealer in Detroit?
Goling. Have you heard of Goling?
Okay. I have heard of them, but I'm sure they took good care. It's a great car. Actually, I had a Jeep Grand Wagoneer driving the state. I'm flipping through a lot of cars because we put a lot of miles on them, and that those new Jeeps are great cars.
Yeah, it's pretty solid. But yeah, well, that's refreshing. That if I don't win this, I'm done. I'm not going to run for all. I think you should. I really think you should. I think people have taken well to you. I'm not just saying that again. I do talk to young people, and like everybody has a positive opinion on you. So like I
Well,
think that
I
your
appreciate
impact
that,
in politics has been good. And even if it doesn't work out here, I would encourage you not to give up, to stay involved. Maybe that's not running for office, but like, please come
oh
on,
no,
stay involved.
I'll do stuff in the community, but no, not politics.
Yeah.
Politics, we should not reward failure. I think Mike Gibbons is a nice guy, but he ran and lost in 18.
Yeah.
That's it. So you don't fail up. This idea that you run and run and run. I mean, my God, Josh Mandel is the poster child for that. You should not fail up.
That's the truth.
If I hired somebody, if I was hiring you, you said you're a banker, you're hiring me, okay?
Yeah.
And you said to me, okay, well, in your last job, how'd you do? Oh man, it's terrible. I mean, that company went broke. How about the company before that? Poof, that one went broke too. Okay,
Yeah.
well, but when you hire me though, I'm going to kick some butt. You'd be like,
That's
next.
true.
You don't fail up in any other profession except for in politics. And I just won't be part of that cycle. And I also won't be part of the cycle where you stay there forever. 2 terms, I'm out. So if the voters of Ohio choose to hire me to represent them in the United States Senate on their behalf, to work for them, to allow me to serve them properly, I will do it for 12 years. I'll put my life on hold for 12 years. I'm not going to take a salary. I'm going to donate it to charity. I won't take a pension. I'm going to bring only Ohio people to Washington, D.C. with me. I don't want a bunch of people who know it all and know how the whole swamp system works. I want people to question everything. I want them to come back to their communities on a weekly basis so that they're accountable. That's what I'm going to do. People will know one thing for sure. Listen, when I go to meetings, I tell people, tape record me, videotape me, hold me accountable, ask me the toughest questions you can, because I'm going to serve the way I am running. And that's the commitment that you have from me. And if I don't, I want you to play this back to me, and I want you to send me a resignation letter and force me to sign it, because I will. Because I am not going to do this to do something different than the way I'm running my campaign, period. And again, I won't be beholden to anybody other than the people of Ohio.
Oh, that's definitely commendable.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. I respect that. So from my side, I have a few last questions. We'll kind of do it like a rapid fire. So first, what do you think the biggest issue is currently facing American society, and why do you feel that way?
The idea that we're not an exceptional country. We've lost this idea of American exceptionalism. I think that's wrong. American exceptionalism is about hard work, personal responsibility, perseverance, dreams that are only limited by your imagination. And we have this idea in our head that that's gone, or that's something that doesn't exist, and that needs to come back. We need to understand that politicians don't solve your problems; they usually cause them. And we need to have self-reliance, self-responsibility, and get that government the heck out of our way and let us do what we need to do.
Appreciate that. So Dane's a banker. I'm a CPA. So my question on this next one is, I've always paid close attention to our federal budget. It's out of control, I think. Spending's out of control. Is there any path to a balanced budget? And if not, what can we do to combat the reckless spending in Washington? What would you do if you are our U.S. Senator?
I will never vote for a bill that increases the scale and scope of the federal government. I will introduce bills to lower the scale and size of the federal government. We need to get the responsibility back to the states at a discount. So we don't need a Department of Education. We need to send that money back to the states and say to the states, hey, listen, the federal government was making you do A, B, C, and D, and it was a lot of waste. So we're going to give you 90% of the equivalent money. We're not going to tell you what to do with it. You be accountable to your voters. That's the path forward, is to do that. Because what happens with these federal mandates, they create this incredible bureaucracy and slowness, which adds to the cost of doing things. So we can, I'll give you an example. Cuyahoga County gets $4 billion a year just in health and human services money from the federal government. But it comes with 9,000 rules, which is what causes it to spend. How are we doing spending that money, by the way? How's the health and human services looking in Cuyahoga County? Pretty bad, right? So you have to have some entrepreneurship in there. You have to have some built-in incentives to do things efficiently. And we can do that because we have a great laboratory of 50 different experiments. We saw it with COVID. Who won the race with COVID in terms of really great best practices? Ron DeSantis. So that's the kind of stuff that we should be doing.
All right, last one from me. Any preference on the GOP gubernatorial race?
Oh God, listen, I'm focused on my own race. I'm focused on my own race. That's a whole lot of drama going on there. And
yeah,
so
there is.
I'll be the first one to say, listen. You asked me a question. I'm not going to be the politician and sidestep it. I'm very disappointed Actually, that's not true. I was infuriated when Mike DeWine closed schools. I thought it was a total disastrous policy. I think he's got to be held accountable by the voters on that one. He's got to answer for that, not me. But I'm just telling you as a voter, not as a Senate candidate.
I
as a
appreciate
voter, it was infuriating. And there was a better path. There's a better way, and not good. And I also don't think that the legislature, and a lot of them, there were some good guys, a lot of good guys, but some of them who looked the other way while the executive was passing laws in the executive branch. You know, our system doesn't work that way. We should have done that the right way, and we didn't. And you know, there's one person in this race that was in the state senate, and where was his oversight? You know, his job is to be the senator, and there's responsibility that comes with that. Didn't do that. That was very, very disappointing.
That's fair. Well, definitely appreciate the transparency and honesty and all those answers. That's refreshing because we don't always hear that from politicians. And obviously you're not a politician, but from candidates, that is. So certainly appreciate the time and definitely encourage everybody learn more about your campaign. How can they learn more? Is it BernieMoreno.com?
Yeah. So the website is has all the information. I know that it's kind of fun to put a picture of me, a gun, and President Trump, but my website actually has a lot of information in there, very detailed policy positions. It has videos. We're going to be putting a lot of the stuff about the border. Let me just close with a couple things. Look at the candidates in this race who talk about the border. Oh my God, the border's a mess. And by the way, it is. They've never been there. Think about that for a second. They've never been to the southern border. How the hell do you have an opinion about something when you haven't seen it with your own eyes? They talk about Israel, supporting Israel. Other than Josh Mandel, none of my opponents have been to Israel. None of my opponents said peep about lockdowns when lockdowns started in March of 2020, except for me. And who the hell is I, right? Some guy who owned a few car dealerships in Cleveland. I'm speaking out vehemently against lockdowns, got tortured. All these other guys in this race had much bigger platforms and could have done something about it. And now they're burning masks and stairwells. But when it counted, they weren't doing anything about it, right? Then you look at it and say, how are you funding your campaign? You're taking special interest money, yet you talk about the swamp. Well, how are you going to fight the swamp when you are it, right? So I think those are the things the voters got to get to know. I think what you guys are doing is great. You know, doing this, you have full-time jobs, so it's very appreciated. If your listeners have any questions, my email is bm@BernieMoreno.com. Very easy to remember. They can shoot me an email. It'll be me answering it. I'm on social media @Bernie Moreno. If you want to know what I'm thinking on a day-to-day basis, that's me tweeting, not my staff of 72 people coming up with the perfect tweet, right? So what you see is what you get.
Oh, we definitely appreciate your time, Dana. It looks like you have something.
No, I'm just going to say, I think I can see why people really like you. I don't watch cable. I'm way too busy. So I haven't seen a lot of the TV ads. And I've heard your name, but like I haven't really heard you speak until now. And it's impressive. And look, I think America's better because of people like you who have come to this country. So, thank you to your family and your parents for coming to America, because it's better. I'm disappointed I didn't get a discounted Mercedes out of this. But I think that there's always, episode 2.
There you go. But again, I sold the dealership, so that's not
I know. Yeah, that's fair. It's sell the dealership. I'm not a Mercedes guy anyways. I'm more a BMW guy. So, but anyway.
Oh, now we were getting along. 55 minutes we were getting along, and you have to say something like that. Something so crazy as that. No. So anyway, in Germany, they make good beer. In Bavaria, they make good cars in Stuttgart. So you just never get that wrong.
Well, yeah, that's true. But I'm not a dentist or a doctor, so I'm not.
Oh boy! There you go.
Well, there we go. Well, thank you very much again. Yes. We greatly appreciate it. Good luck to you. God bless you and your family. If you're ever in Chagrin, let us know, or Youngstown for Michael.
And in Youngstown, we'll be happy to promote it. I'll have to stop out and introduce myself.
Yeah. Well, check social media. So you'll see me out there in social media a lot. So check what we're doing, and I appreciate what you guys are doing. Great to talk to you guys.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks. Take care, everybody.